840, welcome back to the program. Also, welcome back to the program, Michael Jankins. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Good, of course, bankruptcy lawyer who answers questions that you might have. And one of the questions that he's going to answer this morning, amongst many others, includes the term, am I going to lose any of my stuff if I file for bankruptcy? And that probably is the number one question, isn't it?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
People call and they are interested in getting rid of their debt, but they don't want to get rid of their stuff.
Right,
So
makes sense.
They kind of like to keep that, and so a lot of people will ask, am I going to lose my property? And my answer to that is it depends. So that's a real good lawyer type answer.
All right, let's start with the biggie. Okay, what's the biggest one they worry about?
The most important one to most people, if they have one, is a house. And the general rule is you get to keep your house as long as you keep paying your mortgage payment. There are some exceptions to the rule, but it would take up too much time in this segment to deal with those. We've dealt with those before, but general rule, pay your house, you get to keep it. You get to protect the equity that you've built up over the years that you've been paying down your mortgage. Another real big item on the list is, are they going to take my car away? Bankruptcy, at least philosophically, is considered to be a fresh start for people when they get rid of their debt. And so at least the policy of the law is it's a good idea if the person who's getting a fresh start can get to work.
That'd be a really good idea, especially so they can keep the
makes
payments
sense.
up on the house, so to speak. Yeah.
Right. So you get to keep a car.
Now, what kind of car? Because I'm sure that a lot of people are worried about that, saying, oh, I have a fancy car, and maybe that's half the reason you went into bankruptcy.
Right, if you had a Jaguar like Lou might have, you can't keep that.
Jaguar.
But no, I mean, a motor vehicle, you can protect the value up to $7,000.
Which is a decent car. Yeah.
And if you have a loan on the car, then what we're really looking at isn't what the car cost you or how much you have left owing on the loan. It's the value of your car less whatever your loan balance is. So if your car's worth $10,000 and you owe $5,000, well, that's a $5,000 equity that you've developed, and you can protect that.
Okay.
It's important, though, that the car must be in your name on the car title. So if you have a husband and wife and the car titles happen to be all in the husband's name, well, then the wife in bankruptcy isn't going to protect a car, and so if they have to, one of those cars could be potentially up for grabs where they could take it and sell it. But there, again, are strategies that we can utilize to possibly shelter that type of a vehicle. And so, but it's important if you're married, make sure both your names go on the car titles. I know nobody ever thinks about, well, I might file bankruptcy someday, but you are married,
Right.
so it's a good idea to put everyone's name, both names on all your stuff.
Now, what about this? And I'm going to ask you this because you're in the business here. What if you are on the verge of doing this? You're thinking about filing bankruptcy. Would it be a good idea to go and get the name put on the title?
Well, at that point, it's too late. You can't,
Before you file.
Before
you file bankruptcy. Yeah, is it too late then
It is.
to switch it?
Because you have to disclose any alterations to title ownership that you've made within 2 years of bankruptcy.
Within 2 years? Oh, wow,
And so
I
if you
didn't know
change that and and make it that way, it may not hold up.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
Yeah, and the reason is because it's an insider, it's a relative, and if it wouldn't necessarily fall apart in all situations, but because it's your family and things like that, it would probably get
It'd probably
reversed.
fall apart. Yeah.
It'd fall
So
apart.
if you like try and sell it to someone for like $1, so it's not under your name, that's going to come up.
The selling's good, the dollar not so good, because you have to disclose the details, and it has to be something they call an arm's length transaction. In other
Okay.
words, it's got to be a real deal. It doesn't have to be the best deal, but it's got to be something that's within reality.
Okay.
Within reason?
If it's a $2,000 vehicle, you can't give it away for $1. I mean, if you sold it for $500, that
Maybe.
might pass muster.
Okay.
Because it's
Okay.
a quick sale type deal.
All
Good
right.
to know.
All right, so we already talked about your house, we talked about your car, but what about your stuff?
Yeah, so you got your house, and what about the stuff in it?
Right.
That's kind of a big thing, and the good news is, generally speaking, the administrators or trustees of the bankruptcy aren't particularly interested in the contents of people's homes. The protection amount for that is $7,000, and so if you have a husband and wife, you each get $7,000. So $14,000 is what you can protect, and it's essentially what you could liquidate these things for, which basically means garage sales or yard sales.
So it's the garage sale price.
Yes,
on these items.
What you thinking? I don't know if anyone's been to garage sales lately, but last time I had been at one, people don't come with their wallets stuffed full of lots of money, and so they're not willing to spend lots of money, and so it's usually a pretty all-inclusive number. I mean, most people aren't going to lose anything. There's exceptions. I mean, every once in a while we'll have folks that have, $300,000 or $400,000 home and pretty solid incomes, or they did. So they may have some fairly high-end things, and maybe they specially insure some things with riders. So there could be that rare exception where someone really does have quite a house full of things. But I don't know that I can recall in my recollection any of my clients losing their general household belongings. So, that's usually a pretty safe thing.
Okay, first thing that comes to mind, you mentioned high-end items, like maybe a real high-end pool table, for example. Those things are very valuable.
Well, you might know more about that than I. I mean, my experience with pool tables is they're very, very difficult to move. Once they're in a house, they
don't
usually
go
stay
anywhere.
there. And there's not lots of people, at least, we've come across pool tables from time to time. I think I represented a company that was in business that sold pool tables at one point. And I think the liquidation of them is rather difficult just because they're hard to move.
I didn't realize that.
And
I know they're not cheap.
They're not cheap when you get them, but that's the case with a lot of things. But when you want to liquidate it, there's not exactly a humongous market either for people wanting to buy pool tables.
Right.
So, I think artwork sometimes falls into a category that, you're spending a little bit more money for these type of things. And there are certain pieces of artwork, not for the everyday person, that do become valuable, but the stuff that people buy at art galleries, even things that are really nice from artists that people have heard of, the print usually is less expensive than the frame to put on it. And unless it's something that was been around a long, long time, and it was some print that hasn't been in existence, they're not making it anymore, and it wasn't a lot of numbers to begin with. It's a supply and demand, but we don't usually encounter any of that either, because on a used market, it's just difficult to find people that are going to pay big monies for these things.
All right.
I was going to say, because I think of collectibles, and then I also think of jewelry, something that'd be really expensive.
What about jewelry?
Wedding rings generally has an unlimited protection, and in the secondary market, even though diamonds and rubies and high-end gems are really expensive, on the used market, there's not a real vast many places you can go get money for them. I mean, you can go to the local pawn shops. There's a couple places around town that deal in coins and gold and jewelry, and they're willing to make purchases of these things, but they've got lots of this stuff already. And again, I mean, for general jewelry that isn't wedding rings, I mean, we see that you're lucky if they even want it, if you can get 25 cents on the dollar for the stuff.
Wow.
Because these things are marked up like crazy anyway when they're purchased, and then again the market for it just isn't big, and so they're wanting to sell these items at a profit when they go into these stores, so they're not going to pay top dollar to get the item. And there's no real private market. I don't know. I don't really go on eBay, but I don't know that people sell a lot of this stuff on eBay because it's really difficult to know the quality of a gemstone by a picture. I mean,
let me ask you one other thing. We have a little bit of time left here, but what about tools of the trade? What if somebody has some pretty high-end tools that could be all-inclusive?
Well, we have people that are self-employed, that are contractors, or have other kinds of businesses, and they're going to still be in business afterwards. They have a trade: mechanics, plumbers, roofers. And this also falls into the area of farming businesses. I mean, farmers may go bankrupt, but afterwards they still are farmers, and they're going to farm in some way. So their combines, their tractors, all these things, you get to protect up to $10,000 in value. And if you are married and the spouse participates in the business as well, then you're up to $20,000. And so these things aren't really sold at garage sales, so you can't say garage sale. They're auctioned, they're liquidated, they have auctions auctions of this type of equipment on a regular basis throughout the state of Iowa and everywhere else. And it's going to be whatever these things bring at a competitive auction. When we have those situations, we'll have our client go get an appraiser and actually make a written appraisal, so we have backup for our numbers. But those numbers, again, are going to be, you can build up quite a bit of equipment, because most of the time you don't got new stuff. This stuff is really expensive new, and usually it's financed. And so people that have the stuff that's paid for, I mean, you may have a tractor that's a 1990 tractor and it works fine. I mean, but it's got value. And so, and the same thing with non-farm related equipment. A lot of people that have it paid for, it's older and functional, but it's got value, and you can accumulate and have quite a bit if you got $10,000 or $20,000.
So it sounds like if you have the right lawyer, you are protected, and you need to know what you can still keep if you decide to file for
and
bankruptcy.
this would be the right lawyer right here. If people want to get a hold of you, Michael, what's the easiest way?
Reach me on the phone at 255-1855, or find me on the internet at www.iowa-bankruptcylaw.com.
There you go. So again, we have pages of stuff that you can take advantage of, and this guy knows all the
good to
things
know the rules,
you can take advantage of and know all the rules. That's exactly right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. As always, we will be right back. It is 8:52. You are watching CW Iowa Live in West Des Moines.